Hello and a very warm welcome. I am Gushin Garland and you're watching our Firstpost special broadcast. Tehran strikes a US base in Qatar. Hours later, Trump announces an Israel-Iran truce. But then both West Asian nations trade blows, accusing each other of violating the ceasefire. What changed? To get us more perspective on the same, we are now being joined by Scott Lucas, who is an international affairs analyst. Scott, welcome to Firstpost.
Thank you for having me here.
Scott, beginning with both Iran and Israel are blaming each other for breaking the ceasefire almost as soon as it was announced. How do you read into these mutual accusations? Does this mean the truce was doomed from the start, and what does it say about the chances of any real de-escalation?
Let me just give your viewers the breaking news so we can put this together. The Iranians did, according to Israel, fire 2 missiles on northern Israel this morning. The question here is the timing. The ceasefire was supposed to come into effect at 9 a.m. Tehran time, 8:30 a.m. in Israel. That was when the Netanyahu government finally said it would accept the ceasefire. Because remember, they waited several hours after Iran said it would stop attacks before they accepted. If you look at what the Israel Defense Forces say, the Iranians launched the missiles before we got news of the Netanyahu government's acceptance. But because it takes missiles time to travel, they may have been intercepted after the Netanyahu government made the announcement. So the Iranian position is we didn't break the ceasefire because we carried out attacks before Israel had agreed to this. Now, the Israel Defense Minister, Israel Katz, said, we are going to respond with intense strikes. And as I speak to you, I have this from intelligence sources, Israeli warplanes are on their way to bomb Iran, with the defense minister saying that the center of Tehran will be a target.
Very interesting analysis there, Scott. But I also want to ask, President Trump not only announced the ceasefire, but also thanked Iran for its very professional missile warning, even as the US had just struck Iranian nuclear sites. How do you view Trump's crisis management here? Was it effective or did it add to the confusion?
Just let me tell you a story. And that is that when Iran effectively manipulated Trump into declaring the ceasefire, when Iran launched those 14 missiles yesterday on the American air base in Qatar, it notified Qatar, who notified the Trump administration. That is why Trump thanked them. But there was also, Iranians were in discussions with Trump administration officials, including J.D. Vance, the vice president, the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and they let it be known, again, through Qatar, they were open to a ceasefire after carrying out this token retaliation. Now, that, of course, is what Trump then announced. We have a ceasefire. Iran and Israel have agreed to it. Now, Iran, of course, said, we'll accept the ceasefire if Israel halts its attacks. But Israel had not agreed to the ceasefire when Trump tweeted it. Israel was still debating whether to agree to the ceasefire, and indeed they debated for about 10 to 12 hours before this morning. So Trump was premature in announcing the ceasefire, but the real story here is that having been manipulated by Israel only 48 hours earlier to attack Iran's nuclear sites and to enter the war, Trump had been maneuvered by Iran and Qatar to come out of the war and declare a ceasefire. But if Israel hits Iran today, what does Trump do?
Scott, on the lines of ceasefire, Iran declaring victory, as you said, and Israel largely silent. Do you think this ceasefire is just a pause before more conflict, or could it turn into a frozen standoff?
I think the immediate issue is going to be how large this Israeli attack is on Tehran and other areas of Iran. If it's a relatively limited attack compared to the massive strikes we saw in Tehran and western Iran yesterday, then perhaps the Iranians say, okay, Israel hit us one more time, but we can all step back. If this is a large Israeli attack, hitting not only military targets, but say police headquarters, say hitting Evin prison, which they hit yesterday, continuing to try to assassinate nuclear scientists, which they did yesterday, then I think it points to Israel not wanting this ceasefire in the first place and really wanting to break the Iranian leadership, even if they deny that this is regime change. So let's see how large the Israeli response is. And then again, not only how Iran responds to that, but importantly, the Gulf states. Do the Gulf states come out in support of Iran and say this is unacceptable?
Speaking of response, Scott, Russia usually is Iran's staunchest ally, has been notably quiet during these strikes. Do you think Moscow's silence pushed Iran to hold back in its response to the US attacks, or is there more to this diplomatic calculation?
No, I think the Iranians are maneuvering with more attention to the Gulf states and indeed to the Europeans. And remember, they were talking to the Europeans last Friday before the American strikes. I think Russia is tied down with that 40-month invasion of Ukraine, where it's making very little progress, and Russia's suffering economic and political overstretch. It's strained right now. So they couldn't really help the Iranians that much, even if they wanted to. And I don't think they want to. I don't think they want to enter this conflict between Iran and Israel. So Tehran is looking elsewhere. And, you know, as we saw with the fact they're using Qatar as the intermediary to reach the Americans.
Scott, Qatar called Iran's missile strike on Al-Udeid a sovereign issue, even though Iran insisted that the attack wasn't aimed at Doha. What does this say about Qatar's balancing act between its alliance and with the US and its ties to Iran?
It's not just Qatar. It's also Saudi Arabia. It's also the UAE. All three of those countries came out and with various levels of intensity criticized the American strikes on Saturday on Iranian nuclear facilities. Now, that was a bit of a shift. They've been very quiet during the Israeli attacks. I think the Gulf states are expressing their irritation to Washington and to the Trump administration. I think that's one of the reasons why, if not Trump himself, Trump administration officials were saying yesterday, we need to pull this back. We need to step back from intervening in the war. So I think it'll be interesting again today to see how strongly the Gulf states criticize Israel and again send those messages to the Trump administration, which is stop this. Stop the Israelis from throwing the region into instability, which could last quite a long time.
That was Scott Lucas, who is an international affairs analyst. Scott, thank you for your time and thank you for sharing your insight with Firstpost.
Thanks to you and your viewers.
Firstpost now available in 9 languages on YouTube. English,
$36 trillion.
French,
Le FMI, comme
German,
Geschäftsführenden Direktor,
Hindi,
$30 trillion ka-karge mo.
Indonesian,
Pemerintah tanpa pemeriksaan.
Italian,
Fiskali radikali.
Japanese,
4 兆ドル以上も.
Portuguese,
Por causa do próprio balanço patrimonial.
Spanish.
Beautiful bill.
Go to Settings, click on Audio Track and select a language of your choice. Be the first to know what's happening around you in your first language. Firstpost.